Perfect.
Hey, so we're live. I'm here with the Lisney brothers. How are you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Aidan, this is your stream, so.
No, it's the Lisney.
No, it's not.
It's the Lisney brothers stream.
Oh well.
Take
Aidan
over.
invited me. Aidan invited me earlier, and I was like, David doesn't like me. He doesn't want me on this again. And I was like, well, I'll drop
true.
it.
He did take some convincing. I
Uh,
was like, David, you want Kieran on? And he's like, no. I was like, come on, just for
Took-
old time's sake. And he's
it
like,
took-
I guess.
It took me 2 seconds to email Kieran saying, "Hey, we're doing this. Hey, Kieran, I
I'm
can't
sure-
see
yeah.
you. I can't see you.
You can't see me.
No, all I see is your little avatar. Now Aiden's giving me his avatar too. It's like you guys are like,
Oh. I see Aidan. I always only see your avatar, David.
yeah, because my software will only let me do one thing at a time with my camera. So the good news, Kieran, is Matthew Murdoch reached out to me, so I sent him the link to this chat.
Yes, I hope he comes on.
I hope so, but I don't know. I hear from him very rarely. But have you guys heard from him?
No.
Never.
I'm terrible.
But I'm
though.
also a bad friend.
Yeah, I'm terrible at reaching out. I don't talk to anybody. But to be fair, he hasn't reached out to me either. So I'm gonna fall back on that one.
Yeah. Well, he did explain to me that he's been away. So your cameras keep popping on and off, but that's okay.
That's weird. Aidan, I'm seeing you straight up the whole time. Right?
Yeah, I'm seeing Kieran. I'm seeing Kieran and I.
Okay.
The entire.
Now I only
is
see
your
Aidan.
actual being going to be in the video? Are you like sitting there with your icons and your guitar and stuff, or is it just your avatar that the live feed folks are seeing?
Oh no. They're gonna see my little face down in the bottom right corner.
Sweet.
Without too much, I cropped it because I thought that I'd be able to squeeze it in better with the guests, but it's all right. You don't have to see.
Head.
I have a huge head myself, but
that's a very tiny head.
So anyway, Aidan, I guess I haven't talked to you as much recently. So how's it been going with your health and all that stuff?
You mean because I had COVID?
Twice, didn't you?
Yeah.
How'd that go?
It was fine. Oh, it was awesome. I got time off work, and I got to lay around and watch TV, and I didn't have to work out during that time period too, because I'm like, oh, I'm sick, so it's probably not good to move my body. And so the first time that I had COVID, I lost my sense of taste and smell, and that was a real downer because I didn't even take the opportunity to be like, well, you know what, I'm gonna be mindful about fast now. I just like tried to throw the same terrible food down my fat face in hopes that the taste would return, and it was just like it didn't work. So, but second time around, it was no big deal. It was like a mild headache and just like malaise, just feeling tired. So, other than that, I've been good.
That's cool. And your hospital, is it? Once you told me, I think you told me that they're not too keen on the jab down there. Is that right? Still?
They weren't. Now they're mandating it. So. So yeah, I got the. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like I'm not personally. I don't feel like morally over the top about the way that the vaccination was procured, because we're kind of arbitrary about all the medicines that we have. Like, actually, so many medications are produced unethically, and I'm like, well, why are we picking this one to like take a dump on? I just don't like being told that I have to do something. So naturally, I'm like, I don't wanna. But then
Did you hesitate?
Money.
Did you hesitate?
Definitely. Yeah, and I procrastinate with everything that I do in life. So I waited until the last moment to get it, and I got the Moderna, the 2-part series, and I was kind of hoping that they would let forego getting the vaccinations if we were recently sick. So I was thinking, I would test positive for the COVID antibodies So
Yeah.
like I shouldn't really need this.
Yeah.
So my viral,
Oh,
Mhm.
I'm probably calling it.
you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you
Breaking
cut
up
out.
a bit.
I was just saying I probably have a ridiculous amount of the virus. I probably have like a very high viral load as a result of everything. So I
Yeah.
make sure that I breathe directly on patients.
Uh-huh. Are you concerned that you're now subscribed for a lifetime subscription? You're gonna have to get boosters the rest of your life, or no?
Not really. No, I kind of like, because it's very like everybody likes to stick like the mark of the beast on the whole thing, and but like if it is the mark of the beast, then you have to keep getting it, and it's like
Well,
I won't be in the hospital forever, so it's just like, well, how unethical is participation in this? Because like like how many pair of shoes have we all bought or like procured like from some poor person that's being taken.
how many shoes have we procured from a poor person? Say that again.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say I was gonna really go to like China. So like
Yeah.
production in China, we don't really care about the goods that we get from other countries that are basically made in sweatshops. So why would we throw our arms up about other things? Which I understand. I get why people are up in arms about it, but it's just like the hot button issue to um complain about, and it just feels kind of arbitrary to me, because most of the vaccinations that human beings get are they're pretty sketchy, their origins. So
Yeah. But
Kieran
yeah.
years ago. Oh, go ahead. Well, Kieran brought that
You
up a
cut
couple
it.
years ago. Can you hear me again?
What's that? Yeah, I can hear you again. What did I bring up a couple years ago?
Okay. Kieran, you messaged me, Dad, and Uncle Mark a couple years ago because you were concerned about getting Oliver vaccinated with just the regular set of vaccinations, and you were like,
Yeah.
"These don't seem very very ethical."
Okay.
But it was actually a mutual friend of mine, Tim, mine and Kieran, who sent me this. I think it was a podcast with this bioethicist who's an Orthodox Christian, and his thoughts on the vaccination. And it was very interesting. I didn't even have to listen to the whole thing. I'm like, all right, sold. Confirmation bias. I don't really want to have to fight and lose my job anyway. So, Bing, I'll just take it on this guy's word. But that's just brutal honesty, because it's like,
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a lukewarm Christian, David. Didn't you know?
Well, I wasn't actually thinking from a Christian perspective, but just in terms of, jumping on the compliance train. It's going to be a long ride, I think, but I'm just not going to comply because I don't want to hop on the train. Yeah. I'd rather
Canada is way worse off than the United States.
Right.
It's extreme.
Right now, it seems. Yeah.
What about Kieran? What's your take on all that jazz?
Well, I didn't even reach out to you since the last time. Well, I did, but not since I got sick. I got sick like 3 weeks ago or something like that.
Well, you were
3 or 4
feverish.
weeks ago.
You were feverish when you were debating the young kid. Remember?
That was the first round of sickness. That was a sinus infection turned into a pretty severe sinus infection. Actually, that night that we got off that live chat, my temperature was almost 104, and for a couple nights after that talk, I was still pretty feverish, but it wasn't anything that was like out of the norm. And then like 2 weeks after that, my mother-in-law, she went to go do like some sort of checkup at the doctor's for some other medical issue, and it was like a routine kind of thing. But they did like a scan for her chest, and they found she had I guess Aidan, it's called like glass lung or something like that, or whatever it's called. Something like that. Anyway, they found this weird thing. But... They found some weird thing in her lungs. They were like, "Oh yeah, that's indicative of COVID." And she was like, well, we just had an exposure to COVID and I was tested and I didn't test positive. And they're like, yeah, you probably tested too soon. You get tested again. She got tested. Turns out basically everybody got affected. And I was like, well, I feel fine. Like Adrian and I got tested. We didn't test positive. And then Oliver started feeling a little goofy. So we took him to his pediatrician. And she was like, yeah, he's got it. And I was like, well, I was just tested for it and I didn't have it. And that was like 2 days ago. She's like, yeah, you tested too early. Wait a couple days. And I was like, yeah, I don't think this is probably just, whatever. I'm probably going to be asymptomatic and there's nothing actually even wrong, because Oliver seemed for the most part okay. And then that next day, that was on a Friday, that next day on Saturday, I did yard work and I came back inside and I basically just like felt like I was dying. And for 2 weeks, well, for the first week, it was pretty much the normal stuff you hear about, just the extreme fatigue, massive headaches, really bad respiratory stuff. And then, it kind of like moved throughout my sinuses and whatever. And then somewhere like in the third or fourth day, I just lost all taste and smell completely. I still don't have any of that back yet.
Oh.
But everything else got better. But pretty much, I think it was like 14 people in our family, immediate and extended, and Adrian's family got COVID. Her dad is still home from work because he has developed into lower lobe pneumonia. Her grandfather got it and he ended up just passing away from it like last week.
Oh.
Her grandmother got it. She's fine.
That sucks, dude.
And yeah. So a whole litany of people got it in the family, and for the most part, it ran its course about the same with everybody. But there were a few stragglers who got affected really bad. But then again, there was also the comorbidities and stuff with her grandfather was like 88 years old, diabetic, heart issues, stuff like that. So it was pretty sudden. But yeah, I mean,
do you know what they treated him with in the hospital? Or did he die at home?
Yeah, so he went into the hospital. I don't want to give away like too many details. Okay. We can maybe talk about it private.
Yeah.
There was some sketchy stuff for sure. And but that's just Lancaster General Health, and our local hospital is very sloppy. But anyway, so my opinion on the whole jab thing though is essentially what it's been the whole time, which is just I don't trust it. I think that people have to make a decision for themselves as to whether or not, if they want to provide for their families and they feel like that's the only thing they can do, then, be very prayerful about it, be discerning about it, and do what you have to do. But if you can avoid getting
I didn't think at all. In fact,
don't get. And I also want to say about that, about the podcast that you sent, Aidan, that Tim sent. I don't trust Ancient Faith Radio whatsoever. They're completely biased in one political direction, and that.
Do you think that the Orthodox police are going to come after you for saying that?
No, I think that a lot of the people on the ground in the Orthodox Church are in David's position and my position, but unfortunately, like with most media, you're going to hear the loudest, most obnoxious side is the one that's typically wrong, and the one that is actually a vast minority. So,
what was the link? I don't remember the link. Who sent the link? I don't remember that link.
Aidan sent it to me a while ago, and he said, hey, what are your thoughts on this? It was a link to Ancient Faith Radio is basically like the equivalent of like EWTN for Orthodoxy.
Okay.
So there's some good stuff on there, but in the past couple of years, it's gone pretty woke. And
okay.
So, there's been a big crop up of like actual traditional Orthodox content creators. Well, the thing is that with this kind of stuff, they try and pretend like the vaccine is not political, but unfortunately it's become an extremely political thing. So they try and say that one position of it is completely political, but that the other stance or position on the jab is not political. And so because they are
the jab what we're calling it now?
Yeah,
because you guys keep saying the jab, and I haven't heard that before. Like,
Yeah, I got to be careful with
that.
Fewer syllables.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, yeah, the jab, guys. All right, cool.
Also,
I'm just gonna try it out.
Also, they're deleting lots of they're deleting lots of stuff too for saying, you know, they have their algorithms. So
well, it's because of the jab.
Exactly. Such a jackwagon. But yeah, David, it's pretty much the podcast is rubbish.
Okay.
Sorry, but it's rubbish. Yeah, I mean, I just, and I also hate this idea that it's like, oh, I'm a doctor, so because I'm an Orthodox layperson and I'm a doctor, that means somehow I'm an authority on what an Orthodox person should do when it comes to the jab. And I think that it's just, it's ridiculous. They've been canceling tons of. Aidan, you remember, because you make fun of his name all the time because you always make fun of the Orthodox monks' names because you just think they're hilarious. But Abbot Trifon,
pronounce them so.
Yeah, I know. So you always you always make up hilarious names, and it's funny. But do you remember Abbot Trifon? I know I sent you some of his stuff before, and I know you've been like, "Oh, he's good," but his name is hilarious.
No, I don't.
Okay, coolest dude ever. Super humble monk. He's an abbot up in Washington State. They canceled him simply because he said, well, no, I think that it's dangerous to take this vaccine, especially with the little that we know about it. And they canceled him because he was being too political about it. And because he speaks out against Marxism and stuff. And then literally 2 days after they cancel this dude, they come out with all these articles and podcasts on why the vaccine is good. So, I mean, it's not very altruistic, in my opinion. And I think that as hard as I try not to get,
they canceled him.
The company Ancient Faith, because they're a non-for-profit.
Oh, so they did.
So they have some big donors in there that have some pretty obvious political affiliations, and if they pull the plug and say, hey, I don't like the content you're producing, I'm not going to give you any more of my money, then that obviously puts them in a tough position. So they have to cater to the people that are giving them money. I mean, as most non-for-profits go that get corrupted, that's what happened with Ancient Faith, and that's what people are starting to see because they just keep canning good, solid, holy priests who are just literally speaking about the truth, and then they're bringing on a bunch of people that want to resurrect Origin and make him a saint and talk about universalism and a whole bunch of garbage, and it's just nonsense.
Yeah, did you ever listen to that Universalist Orthodox
We're all
guy?
going to heaven.
Yeah,
it was very disturbing because I thought that was one of my first introductions to Orthodoxy, and I'm like, is that what they're all like? And it's like,
no, that is the vast minority position. It's not even a minority, but it's literally not even supposed to be a position. It's condemned as heresy in the Sixth Ecumenical Council. It doesn't matter what part of Origin you want to resurrect, whether it's the pre-existence of souls, or it's universal salvation, or it's the allegorizing of Genesis. It doesn't matter. It's all been condemned in the Sixth Ecumenical Council, and then it was reaffirmed again, or it was condemned in the Fifth Council, and then reaffirmed in the Sixth Council. And then you have crazy Orthodox people that are trying to state insane things like Origin was a saint, and like the Bishop Baron type stuff, like dare we hope that all be saved? I mean, no, we don't, because Christ says that's not going to happen. We can have hope and love and want people to be saved, but if you're trying to say that Satan's going to be redeemed, I'm sorry, Scripture is pretty explicit that that's not going to happen. So it's just that guy irritated me, dude.
Yeah.
I guess hope and desire are two different. I mean, because like what you're stating is we kind of hope that Jesus is wrong about his proclamation about how many people are actually going.
Cutting out.
You there?
Yeah, you keep cutting out.
I don't know. Maybe my internet connection's not good.
It's a poopy.
I'm gonna move my laptop closer to me as if.
Okay. Oh, he's on his laptop?
Somehow. Yeah, it's not a good one.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Is
Can you? Is it not cutting out?
I can hear you now. Yeah, I can hear you now.
So you're saying that there's a whole bunch of Orthodox, not a whole bunch, you're saying there's a minority of Orthodox that are trying to um, elevate Origin as a saint?
Yeah, basically what it is that
Question
there's a
mark?
whole there's a small few of very loud and obnoxious Orthodox that are trying to emphasize a whole litany of heterodox things that we don't accept as a church, and it's unfortunate because it always seems to be the case, whether you're talking about the Orthodox Church or the Catholic Church or the Protestant churches, largely speaking, that the most loud and obnoxious ones are often the ones that are the most heretical. So, one of my biggest pet peeves about there's two things in Orthodoxy that when I first came in contact with it and I didn't know any better, I thought, I don't know if I'm going to have to look into this a lot further, because if this is true, then I don't want to be Orthodox. One of them was universalism, if that was really as wide-reaching as it seemed to be, because I didn't necessarily want to be in a church where that was even allowed to be a debate. And then the other thing was substitutionary atonement, because I kept hearing from all these different Orthodox theologians and writers and stuff like that, like pop theologians, the people that you'd hear on ancient faith, that, oh, Orthodoxy doesn't believe in the atonement of Jesus Christ. We don't believe that Christ was a substitutionary sacrifice for sins, because that's evil. God wouldn't do that. But I was like, okay, but that's totally biblical language to hear that. So what I learned is that actually, no, it's completely Orthodox to teach the substitutionary atonement. It's just that we don't believe that God's wrath is what is poured out on Christ like Protestants do. We believe that it wasn't like he was taking on the punishment of God the Father or anything like that. So, but we definitely believe that Christ was a substitute for us, and that he was an atonement for us and took on our sin and paid the price for it. There's definitely a penal aspect to it, and there's a substitutionary aspect to it. So there's little things like that in Orthodoxy that you hear all these like kind of pop things. Like sometimes like when like a good correlation for a Catholic would be like, oh, don't you guys believe that everything the Pope says is infallible? It's like, well, no, of course we don't
Right.
believe everything the Pope says. It's a common misunderstanding that is super irritating. So unfortunately, there's tons of little things like that within the Orthodox world that people are like, well, I thought that Orthodoxy taught X, Y, and Z. And the other big thing, the third and most annoying thing, is Orthodoxy doesn't really seem to have its doctrine pinned down. And this is what I thought for a little while leading up into actually looking into Orthodoxy, because it basically just seemed like, well, they don't really like to define anything. It seems like they're just kind of like, everything's a mystery, which in one sense, yes, we are big on mystery, but we have a church filled with a history of very accurate and detailed theologians. So it's just, anyway, I'm rambling. Somebody else speak.
David, that's your cue, because I don't have anything good to offer other than just...
I wanted to ask you, Kieran, because I have never really understood why it was necessary for Christ to suffer. Because I know that one drop of his blood would have sufficed, or even one word, or just the thought. I mean, he could do it. He's God. He can do what he wants. But I also know there's the infinite insult of mankind's sin in paradise that needs to be accounted for, and needs to be reconciled, or whatever the word would be, I guess, atoned for.
Yeah.
So I understand all that, but I mean, my understanding of why Christ suffered so much and died isn't really clear. And I think the way I think about Christ's extreme suffering physically, the way he was tortured and had a bad trial and all that sort of stuff, the way I think about it sort of intuitively is that this is what happens if you're patient and meek and humble.
It's an example.
It's an example.
I would think. Yeah.
And then in terms of the spiritual suffering, it's another example to us of which side are you going to be on? Are you going to be comforting Christ during his torture and death on the cross, or are you going to be one of the ones contributing to that pain and suffering? And like, if you're with him, you're comforting him, and if you're against him, you're actually literally torturing and killing him. So yeah, so that's the way I see. That's the way I see the death, the suffering and death of Christ. But I don't really understand theologically what God's intention was. What was the minimum and what was the maximum, and did Christ achieve the minimum or the maximum?
Christ definitely had to die. The reason why he had to die, and we say this in the resurrection hymn on Pascha, we say, Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, or conquering death by death. And that's where you get like the little ICXCNIKA, the Christ conquers. Christ conquers everything, but the main thing that Christ conquers is death. And the only way to kill death is to kill it with death. So Christ, because he was perfect, he didn't actually deserve not the punishment of sin, which is what a lot of people say, oh, we're being punished because we've sinned, so now we have to die. No. Death is simply the natural reaction to walking. Yeah, the natural consequence of walking away from the tree of life. But because Christ didn't transgress the law in any way, obviously, he didn't have to die. He could have lived and he wouldn't have had to taste death. But he took the sting of death. St. Paul says, "Oh, death, where is your sting?" Christ took the sting of death, and literally, it's like he took the sting of death and injected it in death itself. So his blood, one drop, could have sufficed to atone for the entire world, but death itself would have actually had to have been met by Christ, who didn't deserve it, in order to take death and essentially have death kill itself. And so now, obviously, we participate in that. So that's the most like elementary way that I could go into it. But if you're looking for a more extensive dive into the necessity of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, but specifically death, I would point you to Father Stephen DeYoung and his Whole Counsel of God podcast. Also, he has a podcast called Lord of Spirits that's really good. And then another content creator who's also on his way to be a theologian, and he's a biblical scholar and stuff in the Orthodox Church. His name is Seraphim Hamilton, and he goes by the name Cabane the Christian. And I'll give you these two guys. You'll absolutely love their stuff. Cool. But they get really super in depth with atonement and that kind of stuff, and they put it in its proper context, and they correct a lot of the things that are sort of pushed back too hard against by most Orthodox. Because it's true, Protestants, like, if you're talking about Calvinism, they have a really gross idea of God, where essentially not only do they have a God that is demanding of sacrifice to the point because his wrath needs to be satiated, which is really gross. Like thinking about God being passionate enough that he's so pissed off and angry that he needs to kill his own son. Not only is that an issue, but the other issue is that if it's really God's wrath that's pouring out on the Son, Christ, well, number one, he didn't pay the full price because he's not eternally damned to hell. Christ went down into hell only for 3 days, and all he did there was preach the gospel, as St. Peter said. So he didn't actually pay the full price. And secondly, if you have God the Father damning Christ the Son, or pouring out his wrath and punishment on Christ, then that means you have a separation in the Trinity, which obviously can't be. So now you have a separation or a split in the Godhead, which is Nestorian and can't be a thing. So Protestants take it too far and say that God poured out his wrath on the Son because he needed to have this wrath satiated. And some Orthodox take it too far in the opposite direction and say, no, we don't believe any of that, therefore we don't believe in substitutionary atonement. When really it's the opposite. We just let Scripture say what Scripture says. There's all sorts of different analogies for Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. In one passage, we hear that it's like a legal debt. In another passage, we hear that there's a healing aspect to it. We hear that Christ is victorious. We hear all these different analogies. And like any analogy, if you stretch them too far, they're going to break. So rather than saying when Scripture says, for instance, in Colossians that Christ took our IOU or our sin debt and nailed it to the cross, people are like, oh, well, who's that payment for? And then you get certain theologians throughout the church age saying, oh, well, he paid God off. Then you get other people saying, oh, well, he actually paid Satan off. Then you get people saying, oh, well, he paid death off, or he paid so and so off. But to take it any further than what Scripture says, in one sense, you can start to poke holes in everything. So you have to be careful when you're talking about anything theological, not to take any of the scriptural pictures and analogies too far. So is there a legal aspect to atonement? Yes. Is there a healing aspect to it? Yes. Is there a recapitulation aspect to it? Yes, absolutely. All of those things.
Is the Orthodox position significantly different in any way, like a major way or a subtle way, from the Catholic position on atonement?
Yeah, so it's hard to stress how severe it would be, but you guys obviously believe in substitutionary atonement, but I don't think that you guys believe that, for instance, God poured out his wrath on the Son. Yeah.
I don't personally believe that, but I don't know what the church teaches.
I don't think the Catholic Church teaches that.
Well, that doesn't even make sense anyway.
I think that you guys have more nuance in your understanding of the atonement like Orthodox does, but your main emphasis is on the judicial aspect of it. So classically looking at Catholicism, what you can really see is that Protestantism largely mimicked or understood atonement in the same way, but rather than saying that humans have the capacity to participate in the redemptive aspect of it or to partake in the merits of all that Christ did and the saints and all of these things, Protestants would just say, well, no, we don't participate in we don't get any merits for anything, because they don't understand the distinction between merit and payment or wages. They think that if you say that, well, we merited something, blah, 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 that means that God owes it to us, not understanding that merit just means it's like a reward. That God doesn't owe you anything, but because you're faithful, he gives you a little treat or something. So there's a difference only in that aspect, I think, between most Protestants and Catholic understandings of the atonement. And then with Orthodoxy, we kind of take in everything. So you'll hear the different theories of atonement, whether it's Christus Victor or penal substitutionary atonement or the moral exemplar position or whatever. And we look at all those and we say every one of those has some truth in it. That's you can read fathers of the church that lean more heavily on the penal aspect of it. You find more fathers that lean more heavily on the recapitulation aspect of it. If you read St. Cyril, he talks heavily about the recapitulation theory where Christ had to go through every stage of humanity first and redeem it and recapitulate it before he suffered on the cross. And that he looks at the he takes more of the Christus Victor view, which is essentially, Christ conquered death by death, and the atonement, sure, it was there, but I mean, the main thing wasn't that Christ paid a penalty for sin. The main thing is that Christ conquered death by death. So you can find all these different elements throughout the church history, but I think that within the last 1,000 years, from like Anselm up, I think is when Catholicism classically started getting more judicial with its understanding of atonement, and we just don't really look at it like that. Although we acknowledge that there's an aspect to it that's true, to say there's a judicial thing being fulfilled.
So thanks for that. Aidan, I want to get your perspective on what you think the Catholic sort of idea of atonement is. Like, I mean, you can just say you agree with everything your brother said, or you can add whatever is different. But the reason I'm asking you to do this now is because I've actually got my little book of Catholic dogma here, and I'm going to read a tiny paragraph after you've said your thing and see if it changes your opinion at all, and see what Kieran thinks of it too. So what is your basic hunch about the vicarious atonement of Christ on the cross, his death?
Um, I
You're breaking up.
feel
You're
like,
breaking up. Breaking up.
Aidan, are you there?
am I breaking up? Yep. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, you're good. We can hear you now.
Cool.
Go ahead.
No, my view is I don't know. I haven't read too much substitution, but I would assume that it's a very centered um, centered teaching on the whole thing, closer to what Kieran is saying. But Kieran and I had a conversation about a quote the other day, and so I kind of see it as Jesus opened a pathway for all men to follow, and it kind of goes under the you have to die before you die, so that when you die, you don't die. And that's how I kind of think about that, because if I do too much diving into certain things, it becomes too scrupulous for me, and it just kind of like I just over confuse myself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that being said, every time I pop open my catechism, it's so beautifully centered,
Yeah.
and I love the catechism. I love the most recent catechism.
Yeah. I think your brother's looking at
yeah.
it right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Are you looking
Yeah, I
at
am.
it? Oh,
Yeah, I
cool,
wanted
dude.
to. Yeah.
Oh, he's trying to get the head start. Oh, David's gonna say this, and I need to say that this is wrong, right?
No, I want to see.
Here.
I want to see it. The Catechism has such a way about like explaining things that's not like overtly
Technical.
technical. Yeah. So it's kind of like, okay, like I'm reading on Christ offered
That's probably
himself
why
to
I
the
like
Father
it.
for our sins, and everything I'm reading, I'm like, yeah, I agree with that. But there's like so far, there's no talk about like
Kieran, that
explicit
catechism
things.
was written by Masons who are trying to subvert the modern church and
Wouldn't
introduce
doubt it.
basically modernism into the whole gamut. So I think you should close that book and open some Father Seraphim Rose and read to us from that. What do you think, buddy?
Amen, dude.
So-
Amen. Love me some Father Seraphim.
So, one of the dogmas we have in the Catholic faith is Christ offered himself on the cross as a true and proper sacrifice. That's a defeated dogma. We also have another defeated dogma. Christ, by his sacrifice on the cross, has ransomed us and reconciled us with God. And then
That's the other one, ransom theory. Yes, we believe in that too, but not to the devil. Wasn't it Anselm that said that speculated that the ransom was paid to Satan?
I hope not. That's a silly thing to say. But
Anyway,
I can't imagine anybody owing anything to that guy.
No, we don't owe anything to Satan. But there's a little paragraph here called Inadequate Patristic Theories of the Redemption, and it cites Saint Irenaeus of Lyon, and he initiated the so-called recapitulation theory or mystic theory of redemption. And it teaches that Christ, as the second Adam, saved and united with God the whole human race. In this view, salvation of man had already taken place in principle through the incarnation of the Son of God. Side by side with this theory, which gave to the passion and death of Christ a subordinate significance only, Saint Irenaeus also expounds the Pauline teaching of the ransoming and reconciling through Christ's death on the cross. So I guess it just subordinates a little bit the death and suffering on the cross. Origen, on the other hand, changed the Pauline teaching of man's ransom from the dominion of the devil to an unbiblical ransom theory.
So that was Origen, perhaps.
Yeah, he held that the devil, by Adam's sin, had acquired a formal dominion over mankind. In order to liberate mankind from this tyranny, Christ gave his life to the devil as a ransom price. But the devil was deceived, as he was not able to maintain for long his dominion of death over Christ, and so on and so forth. Okay, others explained that the devil lost his dominion over mankind by unjustly trying to extend this right to Christ also. Despite the fact that this error was widespread, patristic teaching held firmly to the biblical teaching of man's reconciliation with God through Christ's death on the cross. the notion of a dominion of the devil over fallen mankind was energetically refuted by Anselm of Canterbury. There you go.
There you go. So it was the opposite. So he fought against it.
Yeah. The notion of the atonement, I don't know if you mind if I read a little paragraph. This is the Catholic nutshell here. It says, there's a dogma. Christ, through his suffering and death, rendered vicarious atonement to God for the sins of man. That's a dogma. The other one is Christ's vicarious atonement is adequate or of full value by reason of its intrinsic merit. That's another dogma. Christ's vicarious atonement is superabundant. That is, the positive value of the expiation is greater than the negative value of the sin. And finally, Christ did not die for the predestined only. Christ died not for the faithful only, but for all mankind without exception. That's an interesting one. A lot of rad trads in the Catholic Church don't believe that.
Yeah, but the thing is that they have that again, because they're importing origin on what that means. There's two views of apokatastasis, which one is the correct view and the other one is the false view. One says that either everyone is ultimately going to be in union with Christ. They might just have to go through some suffering first. And then there's the correct one, and then B, everyone's just automatically going to go to heaven. So you have one with a little bit of suffering, one with no suffering. And then you have the correct view of apokatastasis, which is that all of creation is going to be put back in order, and it's going to be rejustified or rejusticed, meaning everything's going to be put back in balance. So that's the correct view, dying for all of mankind. Nobody technically is actually going to stay dead. I mean, they're going to taste the second death if they're not with Christ, but everyone's going to be resurrected. So that's the correct way to view it, is that everyone's going to be resurrected, and where they're at is going to be in perfect alignment with what is actually supposed to be the case, so that everything is in perfect balance. Because again, like if you take the judicial or the justice view of salvation too far, you start to get an idea that justice is this thing where God needs to satiate his anger and he has to punish somebody. He can't let something be unpunished. When we would say, no, God can supersede that with his mercy, but also you have a false view of what justice is. Justice literally just means things in balance, which is why when you have the little law symbol, you have the statue with the two balancing scales. Because true justice is not having somebody being punished severely, it's having things being put back in order properly and things being in perfect balance. So anyway,
amen to that. There's just a little definition here given of the atonement. By atonement in general is understood the satisfaction of a demand. In the narrower sense, it is taken to mean the reparation of an insult. So I think that is a nice clarification.
You know what's funny though? You know, atonement is like only a couple 100-year-old word.
Does it really literally mean at one?
Yeah, there was, I forget which theologian it was back in the I think it was even after the medieval times. It might have been in the Victorian era or after. But when they were translating I guess it would have been in the I think it was first in the 1611 King James, so it would have had to be around that time, I believe. Fact check me on that, but I know it was around that time. But when they were translating, they had no word for atonement, and so they kind of got this idea of like, okay, well, there's this idea of being put back in proper relationship to God. I'm at one with God, so that's where they got atonement from. So you get all these like different views of atonement, but the word itself is I think it's hilarious because I think that it perfectly encapsulates the holistic kind of Orthodox view of relationship with God, which is to be in union with him, which is what salvation is, to be in union with Christ. So at one with Christ, at atonement. I don't know.
Yeah.
I never knew that before, but I thought that was funny. It's not even. It's a made up word. Totally. I mean, all words are made up, but it's like a very made up word.
Well, it's funny that it made it.
Don't you think the word or the concept? Oh, go ahead, David.
No, I was just going to say one little thing, that it made its way so powerfully into the Old Testament, that Day of Atonement and all that is like very prominent.
Yeah.
So it came in handy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I was actually going to say, don't you think it kind of, the concept of atonement, don't you think it kind of falls short because of Jesus's sacrifice? Will mankind and creation will be propelled into a place that is vastly superior to that of where creation started before mankind fell.
Yeah. Well, maybe we're more at one with God in the second paradise than in the first paradise, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm selfish, so that's what I'm looking forward to. Reading about Adam before the fall and hearing like, oh yeah, you have the chance, you have the opportunity, we all have the opportunity to be in a state that supersedes what he originally had and lost. And it's like, oh, that seems really appealing to me in in one sense, because the only thing better than something is more of something. So,
Yeah.
If less is more, just imagine how much more is.
2 pieces. Exactly.
So
Exactly.
do Christians spend a lot of time thinking about the meaning of Christ's death? Like, I mean, because I find it a little bit mysterious. And is it something that a lot of Christians think about, or not so much?
My wife just came home and said I had to tell her I love her. What was the question, David? I'm sorry. I love you.
Thank you. Same to you. Do a lot of Christians of all different types think about Christ's death and the mystery of it, or is it not something that gets a lot of thought from Christians?
We should think about it a lot.
Kieran, was it you who said something to me, or was it an Orthodox saint that said something about the crucifixion being the actual ending of creation?
That wasn't me.
Oh, well, I read that and that blew my mind. I'm like, oh, we never thought about that before. And it's like, that's a really
didn't you just tell me? Didn't you just tell me about that, or maybe we read it together or something? Because I think I know what you're.
I know I brought it up to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure.
David,
do you know?
I've thought about the death a lot, but not like the full implications of that death, because it's just so. It's so heady, and not only that, but because there is such a focus on the crucifixion, especially in Orthodoxy, especially in Catholicism, that it's a lot like saying a word over and over and over again until it loses its meaning. And so, I have my crucifix here that I love looking at Jesus on my crucifix, but like, really, it should disturb me to think that, like, dude, you have a guy hanging from a cross and literally perpetually like stuck in a state of being tortured and killed. And so I don't know, David. I don't know if it's possible for any of us to truly think enough about.
When I'm in a proper headspace, when I'm doing my rosary and I'm looking at the crucifix and Christ's body represented on this representation of the crucifix, I tripped myself out by doing a meditation where Jesus Christ is in that statue. He's tiny. He's only 6 inches tall. And he's in that bronze or whatever the metal is. He's within there. Like, his body's in there suffering. Like, he's right there. He's 1.5 feet away from my face. And he is literally inside that metal casing, suffering and dying, right? That was a powerful meditation that I had, because sometimes I think, okay, I have to place myself in the scene and I just imagine Jerusalem and all that. It's like, no, screw that. I'm here right now in my room with this crucifix, and Jesus Christ is 6 inches tall. He's inside this metal casing, like a torture device. So that was a powerful and trippy meditation. And sometimes if I'm in a good headspace, I can feel that. And I think we need to sort of connect with that, the reality of it. And another meditation I've been doing at the Mass is getting really, really nervous that the priest is going to spill the precious blood of Christ once it's been consecrated and turned into the blood, and trying to picture that it really is Christ's blood, because it is. But I'm trying to have that nervousness, because when my wife has a glass of water on the couch, I'm nervous. So why shouldn't I be nervous about the priest holding a glass of Christ's blood, right?
Yeah. Hey, David, it says the call's going to end in 10 minutes, just to let you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up. We'll definitely wrap it up because I got to go.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to say about the empty cross of the Protestants, do you think that's a little bit of reluctance to acknowledge the price that was paid, or am I missing the point of Protestantism?
Yeah, I don't know what that is. There is, I think, because of the sacrifice being paid once and for all in Hebrews, talking about the one sacrifice. They look at it and they're like, see, it's over, it's done with. Well, that's because they don't have a proper understanding of the Eucharist and how we participate in the sacrifice.
Right.
Every time we go to mass or liturgy, and so I think it's just a fundamental misunderstanding. But as a side note, like I'm wearing my little 3-barred cross right now that doesn't have Christ on it.
Yeah.
Every cross I have has Christ on it.
Yeah.
There's an emphasis in my church in particular with the resurrection of Christ, because I think honestly, in a lot of traditions of Christianity, the thing that gets most often overlooked is how important the resurrection is, and how fundamental and important that is, and what that signifies. But even the descent into Hades, the harrowing of Hades, and not having a fully fleshed out kind of idea of what's going on there. In most traditions, there always seems to be either the emphasis on just the crucifixion, or the crucifixion's done, bro. Yeah, nothing else needs to be done. Christ paid it all, bro. It's like, yeah, of course he did. But so I think that's something that they're like allergic to crucifix, but they're inconsistent with it. It is weird because they won't wear a crucifix around their
I think it
necks,
also
but
might
you
have
don't.
to do with like an iconoclasm.
Yeah, but
Don't
the
you
thing
think that
is,
might have something to do with it, Karen? The
I think,
imagery.
Yeah.
which is so bizarre though, because having Christ on the cross depicts something that is it's actually depicting
Concrete.
the incarnate word. But when you just have the symbol of the cross, like if you want to talk about paganism, that literally is paganism. An empty cross, that is actual paganism. It's so the irony is just
I never thought of that before.
hilarious. That is a pagan symbol, and it obviously was a pagan torture device. So to have an empty cross with no Christ on it, if a Roman citizen were to look at that back in the day in the 1st century, they'd be like, oh, who are you going to torture and kill? They would have no Christian would have an understanding of what an empty cross meant apart from Christ being crucified on it. So it's so ridiculous, the iconoclastic thing of like. But then what also is weird is like you'll go into and I'm in people's houses all the time, and they're largely evangelical houses, and they'll have pictures of Christ all over the place. They're just not canonically painted or written icons. So because they have a blonde-haired Jesus that's hanging on a cross, it's somehow okay, because it's painted in Victorian style, whatever. But if you have an icon, it's like, oh no. The graven image. It's like, what? It doesn't make any sense.
Maybe they see that window into heaven that
Scares them.
That they were. Yeah. But I did read something very powerful in a Protestant writer of, I don't know, the 18th century or 19th century, something like that. It was all about the precious blood of Christ. And I found it very shocking. I know there are a lot of evangelicals that talk about the blood of Christ and the cleansing power of the blood of Christ. And I like that. I belong to the confraternity of the precious blood. But this writing that I read, it was representative of one particular Protestant group that was sort of obsessed or focused on the blood of Christ and the power of the blood of Christ. So that's maybe not your typical Protestant emphasis, but it was very weird and refreshing to read it. And I couldn't help but think that it was very Catholic. I don't know. Or maybe Orthodox too.
Plead the blood of Jesus. You do get that in a lot of Pentecostal and like charismatic Baptist churches. Yeah. My wife goes to a Baptist church, and he's a great pastor, and he every time that they're at church, he talks about the blood of Christ. But it is rather interesting. So there's good in those traditions, they're missing a lot, and they're adding a lot of weird stuff too. I just think it's funny how ironic it is. We, as Catholics and Orthodox, we get accused of paganizing Christianity, but
Yeah.
most of Protestantism is literally just Gnosticism. It's essentially, you need to believe everything exactly the way it needs to be believed, otherwise you're not going to be saved. And they just import all of these weird dualistic Gnostic teachings, and then we get accused of being pagans because we pray to the Mother of God.
I like in this book, Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma, that I'm reading, doing a little series on it. But the author makes no bones about it. He just clumps together like the errors of like the materialists, the pantheists, and liberal Christian theology. It's like all clumped together, right?
Yeah.
Just like in certain respects, like it's just like they completely missed the boat in exactly the same way. It's like what a group. Like, you got the Gnostic Manichaeans, you got the pantheists, you got the materialists, and you got your liberal Protestant theology. It's like they're strange bedfellows, I guess.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
we'll wrap it up there, but
It makes me wonder where I'm thinking wrong.
Go ahead. Wrap it up there.
That always makes. I was just gonna say that always makes me think like, oh, where am I? Like what? Like if everybody's so wrong, then like where am I? Where's my wrongness? Because
Yeah.
it's really easy to look in those things and be like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and then I'm always just like, oh man, if everybody else is wrong, I'm probably wrong about a ton of stuff too.
Of course.
Yeah,
But that's
sure.
what your brother said.
David, you're the one who kind of.
But your brother
showed me that thinking.
Yeah.
Is so wrong about everything in me.
Yeah. We're so wrong about everything. But that's what your brother Kieran said. Is like, we don't get to heaven by having a checklist of beliefs and getting the quiz right. So.
Right.
But I was just thinking today, we may get cut off at any moment, but I was thinking today about the little child and the two kids in the back seat of the car. And they're so worried about, oh, did mommy and daddy do their taxes properly? Did they remember to file like the A30 form? I don't know if you signed. Oh, I'm so worried about this. And the kids are discussing like this stuff that's well beyond their ken. It's like, kids aren't supposed to do that, right? It's like we're in the back seat. We're supposed to just be good and keep quiet, and that's about it, right? Like we're not supposed to put our nose in God's business, really. That's how I see it.
It's a really good analogy. I like that. It's good.
So and C.S. Lewis talks about how dogma is supposed to like dictate our prayer life.
Yep.
Dogma dictate our prayer life?
Yeah, he talks about how it guides everything. Without dogma, there's.
Yep.
I think he says it's like the light posts. Does he say they're the light?
Life. Am I cutting out again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is C.S. Lewis the one that said they're the lights on the path? Is that what he said? Do you remember that? Dogmas are the lights on the path. Like you're walking a dark path, but we have the dogmas that light up the path. I don't know if that's what
I don't remember.
Said.
I don't remember. I don't know. I like C.S. Lewis though.
Yeah.
He might have. What I'm thinking of is a map and a man. I think he uses something with this. Afraid that like I don't have this dogma right and this dogma right, then I'm going to be way off the path, and it's kind of like you're just kind of at God's mercy anyway. So it's
yeah.
He's going to pour out his wrath on you.
Yeah, exactly.
He already has. Look at this wonderful home. Can you see the wrath raining down on me?
Yeah.
So thanks for taking the time, guys, and I hope you guys don't get any more of the COVIDs. Okay.
Of the coofs.
The coofs.
Of the koofy.
And don't get any more. Don't get any more jabs. How's that?
Oh, it's gonna end.
Oh yeah,
I love you.
Jab.
Bye. Love you guys.
All right. It was nice
love you guys.
Talk soon.
Wait. David, let us know. Let us know what Matt says then.
Yeah. I will. I'll email you.
All right. Cool. Later.
Talk soon.
I just remembered him. All right. Yeah. Tell Matt.